of that. We got it. Okay, here we go. All right. So, good evening, friends. So sorry about last week. Last week we had to stop about half hour earlier than we normally would because my internet kept going out. And we're hopefully going to be changing providers in the next week or so because this has become a habit on the part of our provider. So we will hope for the best. Fortunately, the last day or two has been a little bit better. You will recall when we started this a few weeks ago that we brought up that, first of all, the Kitáb-i-Íqán, according to Shoghi Effendi, is the second most important of all of Baha'u'llah's works. It, therefore, as you can anticipate, is very dense. It's not a book you can sort of just flip through and summarize sections. So what we're doing is an abridged version because Baha'u'llah himself must have understood the fact that you need to slow down periodically and sort of let people catch their breath as they're going through this weighty work. And I'm leaving those sections out of it. What we have been covering is the Baha'u'llah essentially teaching us how to understand what particular terms in scripture mean. Allusions to the sun, the moon, the stars, heaven. We're going to talk about clouds today. Other terms that you will see over and over again in many of the writings, not just in the Baha'i writings, but in the Bible and the Quran. And he wants us to understand who the manifestations of God are. Remember, he's writing to the uncle of the Bab, who is heartbroken at the death of the Bab and the uncle's brother. The uncle who raised the Bab was also martyred. He didn't understand why this had happened, why these two wonderful people had died, and particularly the Bab. And he also couldn't fully appreciate who the Bab was. So this is in response to his inquiries. And so the Quran is quoted a lot more than the Bible, book I'm less familiar with, the Quran, that is. And he is trying to help us understand who manifestations of God are. So tonight we're going to hopefully get through a couple of sections that I think you'll find very thought-provoking. And so without further ado, can I ask you, Sarush, to read the next two slides, please?
Consider the hardships and the bitterness of the lives of those revealers of the divine beauty. Reflect how single-handed and alone they faced the world and all its peoples and promulgated the law of God. No matter how severe the persecutions inflicted upon those holy, those precious and tender souls, they still remained in their ascendancy. They suffered and endured. Is that supposed to say endured?
Yes, yeah.
Endured the plenitude of their power. It might have, yeah. Patient and despite. I think it's missing something.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
no
All
worries.
right.
Endeavor to comprehend the meaning of the changing of the earth. Know thou that upon whatever hearts the bountiful showers of mercy raining from the heaven of divine revelation have fallen, the earth of those hearts hath verily been changed into the earth of divine knowledge and wisdom. What myrtles of unity hath the soil of their hearts produced? What blossoms of true knowledge and wisdom hath their illumined bosoms yielded? Were the earth of their hearts to remain unchanged, how could such souls who have not been taught one letter, have seen no teacher and entered no school, utter such words and display such knowledge as none can apprehend? Methinks they have been molded from the clay of infinite knowledge, and kneaded with the water of divine wisdom.
Okay, I'm going to go back for a second and read you what got cut out when I was doing the cut and paste. Let's see. So the last sentence of that, no matter how severe the persecutions inflicted upon these holy, these precious and tender souls, they still remain in the plenitude of their power, patient, and despite their ascendancy, they suffered and endured. So sorry we got that cut off in the process of doing the cutting and pasting there. So now we're going to, any comments on this first slide? This one's pretty straightforward. We know the messengers of God suffer, right? And even though they have all power, they endure this suffering. So one of the things I'd like you to think about tonight is that in one place in the writings, it talks about the primary school, the messenger of God attending the primary school. Now, one thing we know from the writings is that you and I, all normal human beings, come into existence at the time of conception. The soul somehow forms a connection with our physical body at the time of conception. And the House of Justice has said, we don't know whether it's when the egg is fertilized or when the fertilized egg attaches to the uterus, but sometime in that general period is when the human soul comes into existence and becomes associated with the physical body. But messengers of God have no beginning and no end, just like God. And there is something that is alluded to called the primary school. That these are not, they're not God, but they reflect God and they have missions. And so Baha'u'llah is talking about, the term band of brothers has been used for warriors, the battalions in World War II and so forth. They're in many ways like a band of brothers. They all are, they've had all the same whatever training it is that God gives them. They all have tremendous powers, and they all have very distinctive missions. And so Baha'u'llah is going to be explaining that to us. I mean, this applies to all of them. It's not just to Baha'u'llah and the Bab. This applies to all of them. And one of the interesting things tonight in the sections we're going through, one of the names of when he's talking about messengers of God, he throws out is David. Well, we know David is important. He's in the Bible, but I don't tend to think of him as a messenger of God. So this will help us understand at a much, much deeper level who the messengers of God are. So now, we had talked last week about the word heaven, and now he's going to talk about earth, the word earth in scripture. And the word heaven, does anyone remember last week what the main definition for the word heaven, when we see it in holy writings, what that means? Does anyone remember? Mateen, were you awake last week? You're muted, dear, if you will have nothing to say. Okay.
I have nothing to say. No.
Okay. Well, one of the main ways, the definitions of the word heaven, anytime you encounter it in a scripture, is the divine revelation of that messenger of God. So the heaven of Baha'u'llah is his teachings, his revelation. Now we're going to talk about another image that's used over and over again in the writings, the earth, and how the earth in many of these passages is actually talking about the hearts of men as being the earth. The soil is the heart. What's in the heart? What's in the human heart? So Jesus gives a parable about someone sowing seeds, and some fell onto rocky ground, some fell onto ground that had only a tiny bit of topsoil, others fell into good soil. Well, that's the human heart that Jesus was talking about. And it's also sometimes the word earth is used. So in this passage, we're going to go through a whole Baha'u'llah gives actually a very lengthy explanation of the term earth and how the term earth is the human heart. So we're not going to dwell on this because there's so much else to cover, but this is, I've eliminated part of this passage, but I want you to understand this because you'll see it again later. So the people, he's talking about what myrtles of unity hath the soil of their hearts produced. These are the hearts that have been changed by divine knowledge and wisdom. Were they to remain unchanged, their hearts remain unchanged, how could they be saying all the things? So he's saying in essence in this that there are people who are totally transformed by the message of a messenger of God. Their hearts were good earth, and so they were completely changed, even if they had no formal earthly education. And they display such knowledge and wisdom despite this lack of formal earthly education, because they have knowledge and wisdom that comes from the revelation. He says, methinks they have been molded from the clay of infinite knowledge and kneaded with the water of divine wisdom. So now he's going to talk about knowledge itself. So Shireen, can you read the next few slides, please?
Sure. Also, my internet is a little bit unstable, so if I cut out, I apologize.
We understand.
Knowledge is a light which God casteth into the heart of whomsoever he willeth. It is this kind of knowledge which is and hath ever been praiseworthy, and not the limited knowledge that hath sprung forth from veiled and obscured minds. This limited knowledge they evenly stealthily borrow one from the other, and vainly pride themselves therein. Would that the hearts of men could be cleansed from those man-made limitations and obscure thoughts imposed upon them. Haply they may be illumined by the light of the sun of true knowledge, and comprehend the mysteries of divine wisdom. Consider now, were the parched and barren soil of these hearts to remain unchanged, how could they ever become the recipients of the revelation of the mysteries of God, and the revealers of the divine essence? Thus hath he said, on the day when the earth shall be changed into another earth.
Sort of a dangling quote out there at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But he's talking about the hearts of men being changed in that quote of the Quran. Good evening, Mana.
Hi.
Welcome.
I was on a startup call. Sorry.
That's all right.
Trying to make the money to spend on the faith and save the world.
Ah, good. Okay, so it talks about good, there's two kinds of knowledge. And then there's the light which God casteth in the hearts of whomsoever he willeth. This is good and praiseworthy. And then there's the limited knowledge that has sprung forth from the veiled and obscured minds. And he says that among human beings, we even borrow these ideas from each other that come from obscured minds, veiled and obscured minds. Did anyone think of an example of this latter?
Oh yeah, it's when all the hippies I meet, they like take ideas from like, well, in this case theosophy,
Right.
the teachings of theosophy, and then like they twist it, they take those ideas and they're like, yeah man, I'm like so spiritual. Or when they take yeah,
Yeah.
basically just they have like, I have no religion, man, but they just tried creating their own ideas and they bring it together. And like, yeah man, my spirit guide is like totally this guy that Theosophist talked about. And then they think, yeah, if I do mushrooms, I'll just connect with my spirit guide,
Right.
some other kind of drug, and well, they see something, but there's a reason why they call it hallucinogens.
Right. Thank you. Well, even half the stuff you learn in college, particularly in the humanities, is coming from people who don't have a spiritual basis. So they may get it right sometimes, but they're not using the true standard in how they acquire knowledge and judge things. And they just borrow from each other. Look at all the footnotes. Any comments on that? Now here's something that's pretty astounding that he just sort of throws out here. Martin, can you read this?
The breeze of the bounty of the King of creation hath caused even the physical earth to be changed. Were ye to ponder in your hearts the mysteries of divine revelation.
Mr. Saba, when he was working on the ark and the terraces, was spent a lot of time doing research into the writings about the ark and terraces to see what he could find, and he found that the terraces will have a spiritual change that will cause a physical change of the earth. The mystical aspect of the terraces there in Haifa are going to cause a physical change in the earth. I don't understand how that works.
I can share a funny story, or maybe it's not so fun, or it's interesting. I just was on pilgrimage, and Martin was also there at the same time I was on pilgrimage. We were just there at the end of December. But the architect, Faribur Sapa, was there with his family as well. And I wasn't in his group. And Martin, I don't know if you were in his group, but I became friends with some people, or there's people we knew who were in his group. And so when they were doing the visit on the ark and the terraces, the tour guide would be like, okay, Mr. Sapa, you can explain. And, they were like resharing a story. Some of our friends were resharing a story that he shared about how he actually, I'm forgetting the name of the street right now. I'm blanking on the name of the street, but he had to petition the street to be changed by to decrease by 5 feet in order to, because he was like, what was reshared was that he had read that, kings and queens and these people are going to be visiting the terraces, and that kings and queens cannot be stopped at a stoplight to visit the shrine of the Bob. Like, it's not going to happen. So through much effort and great petition and talking with the city ordinances, doing all these things, they were able to petition and actually lower the street by 5 feet or something like that, so that they could have it without a traffic light. So people could cross and visit the terraces. But I'm sure this is much more meaningful than just changing the street by 5 feet, or but I feel like that's pretty significant in its own way.
Right. Yeah. Well, they did that, and they also, we remember all that. We were there when that was going on. All of that was going on. But yeah. So we have to remember that the spiritual coming of a messenger of God, it's like this huge burst of spiritual energy comes into the world, and he's saying, the breeze of the bounty of the King of creation hath caused even the physical earth to be changed. So he's just talked about the earth of the hearts of men as being the physical earth. He's saying even as being the spiritual earth. He says even the physical earth is changed when a messenger of God comes. So I don't know how that works and how we would determine in what way. Well, but we know the earth, the physical earth, is much different from what it was 200 years ago. Some of it's man-made. But
what is like an example, like in your mind, you know, let's say 500 years from now, whatever, 1,000 years, like what this could actually mean? Like I get the 5 feet. That's actually really interesting. I didn't know that. But like in terms of like, you know, the entire physical earth can be changed. What is that, like Pangea? Like are we talking about continents moving? Like what is or is it something more than that?
you know, there are lots of things about how the climate's going to alter in various places, and Abdu'l-Baha apparently talked about how palm trees would grow in what's now the Arctic and things like this. So, you know, all of these things, you know, we talk about global warming, and there may be an element of man causing it, although I think there's hubris in asserting that. But you know, the earth is always going through some major, it seems to be going through some adjustments right now. So, you know, the poles shift, all kinds of things could happen that would cause a shift. But he's saying that the breeze of the bounty of the King of Creation hath caused even the physical earth to be changed with the coming of Baha'u'llah and the Bab. So this is something to think about. I don't know. You folks will probably be in a better position than my generation to understand this.
I will say that I think that we, the breeze, I mean, I think the fact that human progress has perhaps been accelerated.
Right.
The telegraph was invented in 1844, and that enabled, fast communications across the world. And I think that sped up the rate of technology, and then the energy usage and the concomitant to global warming.
Right.
And there's one aspect, but then another aspect is, I think, just the fact when the Baha'u'llah said that the city is the abode of soul, of bodies, then the country is the abode of souls.
Mm-hmm.
And just our desire to beautify our, like, take LA for instance, just the sprawl in Southern California and contrasted with Southern Oregon where I'm at right now. And like I just drove through these fields filled with barns and cows and orchards and surrounded by hills with pine forests, and I'm just like, or even like, you go to Ventura County, which has a similar climate, and it's beautiful fields of chaparral. But I guess, promoting a regreening of the planet and, reducing your impact on it, because I'm of the opinion we are destroying our planet. The relentless quest for material gain. And as a quote, not until the last fish is fished out of the river and the last tree is chopped down, will the capitalists realize that money doesn't grow on trees. And I think in order for us to turn what we're doing and make an impact, we'd have to come together globally in order to save the world.
Thank you. You're right. So the world will change physically to the degree mankind can change it because of the coming of Baha'u'llah and our enhanced understanding of our stewardship for it. But there may be other things that are going on that right now we aren't as aware of, and we'll be able to look back and go that, gee, between 1817 and now, look at what's happened with something else. Anyway, so he sort of throws that out in the book. And now let's move on because he didn't want to explain it to us. So Kimia, can you get the next 2 slides, please?
Yeah. And now comprehend the meaning of this verse. The whole earth shall on the resurrection day be but his handful, and in his right hand shall the heavens be folded together. Praise be to him, and high be he uplifted above the partners they join with him. And now be fair in thy judgment. Were this verse to have the meaning which men suppose it to have, of what profit, one may ask, could it be to man? Moreover, it is evident and manifest that no such hand as could be seen by human eye could accomplish such deeds, or could possibly be ascribed to the exalted essence of the one true God. Nay, to acknowledge such a thing is naught but sheer blasphemy, and utter perversion of the truth. And should it be supposed that by this verse are meant the manifestations of God, who will be called upon on the day of judgment to perform such deeds, this too seemeth far from the truth, and is surely of no profit. On the contrary, by the term earth is meant the earth of understanding and knowledge, and by heavens, the heavens of divine revelation. Reflect thou how in one hand he hath, by his mighty grasp, turned the earth of knowledge and understanding previously unfolded into a mere handful, and on the other spread out a new and highly exalted earth in the hearts of men, thus causing the freshest and loveliest blossoms and the mightiest and loftiest trees to spring forth from the illumined bosom of man.
My husband's been sitting in. So this quote from the Quran, the whole earth shall on the resurrection day be but his handful, and in his right hand shall the heavens be folded together. Praise be to him, and high be he uplifted above the partners they join with him. Now he's saying anybody who thinks that this literally is going to happen is that God's going to hold the earth in his hand and fold the heavens in that gigantic hand, fold the heavens and the earth together. So if you were a Islamic literalist, to think that God on the resurrection day is going to do something like that, he says this is not only silly, it's blasphemy and perversion to try to interpret such a verse that way. I mean, we know plenty of people of other religions who are still trying to expect literal things to happen based on their reading of scripture. So he's saying clearly there's not going to be a giant hand doing this, right? So what Muhammad is talking about is, here's another definition of earth. So the last one, it was hearts. Now it's earth of understanding and knowledge. And heaven, back to the same thing, heavens of divine revelation. So he's changing the hearts of men with a new revelation, a new heaven. So there will be a new earth with the hearts of men who were affected by this new heaven will be a new earth. That's what he's saying. I wouldn't have figured that out on my own. You're probably a lot smarter than I am. But without Baha'u'llah explaining it to me, I wouldn't have figured out that verse from the Quran on my own. Okay, so now.
Kathy, I have a question. You know that when it's talking about, you know, how the breezes, the earth's changing and stuff, could that possibly mean like not literally, you know, could that just mean like you said, when the manifestations of God arrive and there's this breeze of technology and sort of changes that are happening, could that easily just mean that, you know, this happens a lot, you know, you saw it in Christianity when they're like, oh, the next manifestation of God comes, there'll be trumpets and you know, angels will fall from the sky. It kind of, it feels similar to that, where it's like, can the earth really change, or is it more of a figure of speech of like, when this happens, like that, the breeze of the bounty of the king of creation. Like it feels like that, it feels like it's just a figure of speech.
Except that the quote, which was translated by Shoghi Effendi, says, caused even the physical earth to be changed. So that sort of looks like a very literal and not a symbolic. But that's just my guess. So it could be symbolic. I'm sure there's some symbolism in it. There's always symbolism, but caused even the physical earth to be changed. So, God is all powerful. He's doing things that, well, this is what we call miracles, is when things seem to go against the laws of nature too, right? So we don't know. I don't know. But you could be right, but he says physical earth. So let's see. So Mateen, can you read the next couple and see if these help us a little bit with this?
Reflect how the elevated heavens of the dispensations of the past have, in the right hand of power, been folded together, how the heavens of divine revelation have been raised by the command of God, and been adorned by the sun, the moon, and stars of his wondrous commandments. Such are the mysteries of the word of God, which have been unveiled and made manifest, that haply thou mayest apprehend the morning light of divine guidance, mayest quench by the power of the reliance and renunciation the lamp of idle fancy, of vain imaginings, of hesitation and doubt, and mayest kindle in the inmost chamber of thine heart the newborn light of divine knowledge and certitude. Know verily that the purpose underlying all these symbolic terms and abstruse allusions, which emanate from the revealers of God's holy cause, have been to test and prove the peoples of the world, that thereby the earth of the pure and illuminated hearts may be known from the perishable and barren soil, from time immemorial, such hath been the way of God amidst his creatures, and to this testify the records of the sacred books.
The story about Abdu'l-Baha gave a talk, and when he was done, a woman came up to him and said, Abdu'l-Baha, why do you repeat yourself so much? And he said, well, do you remember what I just said? And she couldn't. That's why I do it. So clearly this bit right here, this is a review from what he's already covered. Remember, he already explained about moon, stars, sun, representing the commandments of God, the heavens being the divine revelation. And he's already explained that. He's just reminding us of what he's already said. And now he's saying, this is how God works. He doesn't lay it out and say on August the 14th, 3020, the next manifestation of God is coming. He gives it in slightly veiled language. He talks to us about how we should perceive a messenger of God in veiled language to test and prove the peoples of the world. This is how he operates, how God always operates. That's why he's trying to give us the keys so we will understand it when we encounter it. Now he's going to give us a couple of stories. So Kimia, can you give us the story of the Qibla, please?
Reflect upon the revealed verse concerning the Qibla when Muhammad, the son of prophethood, had fled from the dayspring of Batha unto Yathrib. He continued to turn his face while praying unto Jerusalem, the holy city, until the time when the Jews began to utter unseemly words against him, words which, if mentioned, would ill befit these pages and would weary the reader. Muhammad strongly resented these words. Whilst, wrapped in meditation and wonder, he was gazing toward heaven, he heard the kindly voice of Gabriel saying, We behold thee from above, turning thy face to heaven, but we will have thee turn to a Qibla which shall please thee. On a subsequent day, when the Prophet, together with his companions, was offering the noontide prayer and had already performed 2 of the prescribed rakats, the voice of Gabriel was heard again. Turn thou thy face toward the sacred mosque. In the midst of that same prayer, Muhammad suddenly turned his face away from Jerusalem and faced the Kaaba. Whereupon a profound dismay seized suddenly the companions of the Prophet. Their faith was shaken severely. So great was their alarm, so many of them, discontinuing their prayer, apostatized their faith. Verily, God caused not this turmoil, but to test and prove his servants. Otherwise, he, the ideal king, could easily have left the Qibla unchanged and could have caused Jerusalem to remain the point of adoration unto his dispensation, thereby withholding not from that holy city the distinction of acceptance which had been conferred upon it.
Can you get this one, please?
In the eyes of God, the ideal king, all the places of the earth are one and the same, excepting that place which, in the days of his manifestation, he doth appoint for a particular purpose. Even as he hath revealed, the east and the west are God's. Therefore, whichever way ye turn, there is the face of God. Notwithstanding the truth of these facts, why should the Qibla have been changed, thus casting such dismay amongst the people, causing the companions of the Prophet to waver, and throwing so great a confusion into their midst? Such things as throw consternation into the hearts of all men come to pass only that each soul may be tested by the touchstone of God, that the true may be known and distinguished from the false.
Any comments on this story? In his run-up to this, he mentions that all of the messengers of God, and this is where he names David among them, and Jesus, and I forget who else, I'd have to go back and look, between Moses and Muhammad, kept the Qibla at Jerusalem. But yet Muhammad, because he was hurt by the Jews, and the Jews were so associated with Jerusalem, it hurt his heart to have it as the Qibla. So the angel Gabriel, who is the manifestation of the Holy Spirit in Islam, said, if you want it somewhere else, it's okay. And then suggested to Muhammad that he turn to the Kaaba in Mecca, which of course made him very unpopular all of a sudden with many of his followers, whose faith was tested at that moment. Pretty straightforward. Okay, Shireen. Hello, Iman. Welcome back. So we're going to then talk. Okay, if you can read this one, please, Shireen, and then we'll stop on this one for a second.
Were men to meditate upon the lives of the prophets of old, so easily would they come to know and understand the ways of these prophets, that they would cease to be veiled by such deeds and words as are contrary to their own worldly desires, and thus consume every intervening veil with the fire burning in the bush of divine knowledge, and abide secure upon the throne of peace and certitude.
So what's he asking us to do in this?
He's asking us not to think in the way of like a human, regular old human being, but to think that if you could even possibly think like how a prophet would be. And it's just like a different playing field.
Right.
A different league of its own.
Right, right. So he went into I think, okay, so he then gives us 2 lengthy stories that we're going to skip over them because you pretty much know them. First of all is the story of Moses. And we know that Moses, who was from a Hebrew background, had been raised by the Pharaoh and the court. And one day he's out in public and one of his ethnic kinsmen is in a fight and he calls for Moses to help him. And Moses ends up killing the other man, who's an Egyptian. And he has to flee because he's going to be arrested and probably executed if they catch him. And so Moses, this messenger of God, kills a man in a fight. And the Baha'u'llah goes into that story in some depth. Then he talks about the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, who is very much venerated, particularly in certain Christian denominations, and about her despair at being pregnant without being married, and relates that she wished she had never been born, particularly after Jesus was born. When he's a baby, she's wishing she had never been born. She's suicidal because she's got a baby out of wedlock. And she comes from a group of Jews who are very strict in their keeping of the Jewish laws. And she herself is a devout Jew. So she knows that she never was with a man. And she knows that he was born of the Holy Spirit. But how do you explain that to the neighbors, right? So one of the things that we in our age do not think about with Jesus is that in his age, he was a bastard. He was a fatherless man. And that had a tremendous stigma. In fact, it had a stigma in Western society up until well into the middle of the 20th century, being a bastard. That's what Jesus was. So Moses is a murderer and Jesus is a bastard, in the literal sense of both of those. So, Kimia, can you read a little bit more, please?
Behold, how contrary are the ways of the manifestations of God, as ordained by the King of creation, to the ways and desires of men. As thou comest to comprehend the essence of these divine mysteries, thou wilt grasp the purpose of God, the divine charmer, the best beloved. Thou wilt regard the words and the deeds of that Almighty Sovereign as one and the same, in such wise that whatsoever thou dost behold in his deeds, the same wilt thou find in his sayings, and whatsoever thou dost read in his sayings, wilt thou recognize in his deeds.
The divine charmer. Can you get the next one, please, Kimia?
And now take heed, O brother, if such things be revealed in this dispensation, and such incidents come to pass at the present time, what would the people do? I swear by him who is the true educator of mankind and the revealer of the word of God that the people would instantly and unquestionably pronounce him an infidel and would sentence him to death.
So what sort of big test do you think happened within the Baha'i dispensation, equivalent to Moses being a murderer or Jesus being a bastard? Can you think of anything that would cause, what incidents would have caused people to turn away from the message in this day? Yeah.
The assassination attempt of the Shah.
Exactly, the assassination attempt of the Shah. And then there's one much later. Those of you who just went on pilgrimage ought to know the answer to this question. The murder of the Azalis, right? Baha'u'llah was accused of that. And Abdul Baha and Baha'u'llah both were sent to prison, to jail, for the murder of the Azalis and Akka. So these things happen. And the messenger of God sometimes gets wrongfully accused, because if you read the story of Moses, for example, he sort of got caught up in a situation. It wasn't necessarily that he was a mean or a bad person. He just got caught up in a situation. And Mary had no control over the fact that God decided to give her a baby without giving her a husband, right? So Baha'u'llah had nothing to do with either the assassination attempt on the Shah or the murder of the Azalis. Of course, at the time he's writing this, The murder of the Azalis has not happened, but the assassination attempt has. So Iman, can you read the next few, please?
Yeah. If the eye of justice be open, it will readily recognize in the light of that which hath been mentioned that he who is a cause and ultimate purpose of all these things is made manifest in this day. Though similar events have not occurred in this dispensation, yet the people still cling to such vain imaginings as are cherished by their reprobate. How grievous the charges brought against him, how severe the persecutions inflicted upon him. Charges and persecutions, the like of which men have neither seen nor heard.
I'm sure that the Bab got all sorts of charges against him because of what happened at Sheikh Tabarsi, Neriz, the other times when Babis took up guns. Imam, can you keep going, please?
Yes. O brother, kindle with the oil of wisdom the lamp of the Spirit within the innermost chambers of thy heart, and guard it with the glow of understanding, that the breath of the infidel may extinguish not its flame, nor dim its brightness. Thus have we illuminated the heavens of utterance with the splendors of the sun of divine wisdom and understanding, that thy heart may find peace, that thou mayest be of those who on the wings of certitude have soared unto the heaven of the love of their Lord, the all-merciful.
Thank you. He has all these beautiful things in the middle of his main narrative. Okay, so Manav, can we get you to read the next one, the next couple, please?
Please, okay. Concerning his words, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. By these words it is meant that when the sun of the heavenly teachings hath been eclipsed, the stars of the divinely established laws have fallen, and the moon of true knowledge, educator of mankind, hath been obscured, when the standards of guidance and felicity have been reversed, and the morn of truth and righteousness hath sunk in night, then shall the sign of the Son of Man appear in heaven. By heaven is meant the visible heaven, inasmuch as when the hour draweth nigh on which the day star of the heaven of justice shall be made manifest, and the ark of divine guidance shall sail upon the sea of glory, a star will appear in the heaven, heralding unto its people the advent of that most great light. In like manner, in the invisible heaven, a star shall be made manifest who, unto the peoples of the earth, shall act as a harbinger of
Harbinger, you got it.
harbinger of the break of that true and exalted morn. These twofold signs in the visible and invisible heaven have announced the revelation of each of the prophets of God, as is commonly believed.
So Baha'u'llah says that there is both a physical star when a messenger comes, and then there are invisible stars. These are the heralds who come. And he gives us if you take the time and go back and read this book in depth, you will see that he goes on about these particular stories. So Baha'u'llah tells us about Abraham, that when Abraham was born, Nimrod, the king, had a dream about the coming of someone special and talked to his soothsayers. And then that there was actually who said that the soothsayers told the king that they had seen a physical star in the heaven that coincided with the king's dream. And at the same time, there was a person who Baha'u'llah does not name, who was a herald to Abraham. Moses, he says that soothsayers warned Pharaoh the star that they saw. and that there was a person who was a herald to him, again unnamed, who was a sage. Jesus, he talks about the story of the coming of the Magi, these Zoroastrian priests, due to a star in the heavens, and talks about John the Baptist, Yahya, in Arabic, son of Zechariah, who we refer to as John the Baptist, as his herald. Then he says with Muhammad, there were the signs of in the visible heaven, and then 4 men who were heralds, with Salman as a servant to each of them in turn. This is part of this story of Muhammad. And then with the Bab, he says, an astronomer hath announced the appearance of his star, and Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazem's, those 2 resplendent lights were the heralds. So in the physical heavens, there is a star, and then there are the heralds. Every time a messenger comes, a major messenger comes. Very interesting. I don't know what the star is for the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Stephen Phelps would probably be a good person to ask about that. From all that we have stated, it hath become clear and manifest that before the revelation of each of the mirrors reflecting the divine essence, the signs heralding their advent must needs be revealed in the visible heaven as well as in the invisible, wherein is the seat of the sun of knowledge, of the moon of wisdom, and the stars of understanding and utterance. And this is a very interesting last sentence. The sign of the invisible heaven must needs be revealed in the person of that perfect man, who before each manifestation appeareth, educateth, and prepareth the souls of men for the advent of the divine luminary, the light of the unity of God amongst men. So he is referring to Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazem as perfect men who educated and prepared souls for the advent of Baha'u'llah and the Bab. Interestingly, in working on the film The Gate and looking at some of the research done by the late Dr. Firuz Kazemzadeh and his father was also a scholar. They knew Russian and got into the Russian archives and found that in the southern area of what became part of the Soviet Union, just over the border from Baku in that area, which is kind of on the Russian border, there was another herald. There were heralds born there who were preparing people for the coming of the promised one in what was then under the Tsar of Russia, which was one of the reasons that the Tsar of Russia was so anxious to get the Bab away from Baku and to Sharik, because so he used his ministers in Tehran to convince the Shah to move the Bab to Sharik, to get him away from the Russian border. So it's like God gave spares this time. So not only do we have Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazem, but there were other people who are actually mentioned in some of the Baha'i writings who were part of being heralds for the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah, God was not going to take any chances. They were going to be heralds, whether something happened to Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazem or not. So now we're going to go through clouds, and we haven't been at this quite an hour since we started the recording, and I'll try to go maybe another 10 or 15 minutes. I know you guys have to prepare for dinner. Is that okay? Let's see if we can get through the cloud section. All right. So, Iman, can you read the next couple of slides, please?
Yes. With reference to his words, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. These words signify that in those days men will lament the loss of the sun of the divine beauty, of the moon of knowledge, and of the stars of divine wisdom. Thereupon they will behold the countenance of the promised one, the adored beauty, descending from heaven and riding upon the clouds. By this is meant that the divine beauty will be made manifest from the heaven of the will of God and will appear in the form of the human temple. The term heaven denoteth loftiness and exaltation, inasmuch as it is the seat of the revelation of those manifestations of holiness, the day springs of ancient glory. These ancient beings, though delivered from the womb of their mother, have in reality descended from the heaven of the will of God. Though they be dwelling on this earth, yet their true habitations are the retreats of glory in the realms above. Whilst walking amongst mortals, they soar in the heaven of the divine presence. Without feet, they tread the path of the Spirit, and without wings, they rise unto the exalted heights of divine unity. With every fleeting breath, they cover the immensity of space, and at every moment traverse the kingdoms of the visible and the invisible. Upon their throne is written, nothing whatsoever keepeth him from being occupied with any other thing. And on their seats is inscribed, verily, his way differ every day. They are sent forth through the transcendent power of the Ancient of Days, and are raised up by the exalted will of God, the most mighty King. This is what is meant by the words coming in the cloud of heavens. Clouds of heaven.
Thank you. Now, this slide I'm going to read again because listen to it carefully. This is really cool. This is explaining a whole dimension of the messengers of God that we don't normally think about. This is true of all of them, what I'm about to read and what Iman just read. These ancient beings, though delivered from the womb of their mother, have in reality descended from the heaven of the will of God. Though they be dwelling on this earth, yet their true habitations are the retreats of glory in the realms above. Whilst walking amongst mortals, they soar in the heaven of the divine presence. Without feet, they tread the path of the Spirit, and without wings, they rise unto the exalted heights of divine unity. With every fleeting breath, they cover the immensity of space, and at every moment traverse the kingdoms of the visible and the invisible. At every moment traverse the kingdoms of the visible and the invisible. Upon their thrones is written, nothing whatsoever keepeth him from being occupied with any other thing. And on their seats is inscribed, verily his ways differ every day. They are sent forth through the transcendent power of the Ancient of Days, and are raised up by the exalted will of God, the most mighty King. This is what is meant by the words coming in the clouds of heaven. So what do you take from this about the nature of the messengers of God? What do they do?
It's similar to the thing that you mentioned about the tree. I really like that because it really connects everything. And this is my interpretation of it, is that, you know, this actually makes a whole lot of more sense. That I always wondered, like, how is this feeling of, you know, just energy is going through their minds, of how are they able to write, you know, paragraphs and pages and, you know, books. You even said this book, Kitáb-i-Íqán, was written, it was like, how short was it, like 48 hours or something like that?
48 hours, 2 days,
You
2
know,
nights.
how, you know, and you're thinking, how is that possible? Well, besides them being manifestations of God and being the all-knowing, they're also, it's as if like part of their mind is literally sitting right in front of God, and God is just speaking to them, and they're just like in their hand and their bodies and the other side of on this earth, and they're just writing and they're just listening. They're like, okay, yeah, what's next? Okay, sure, what's next? Okay, thank you very much. Like, it just, and like, it's cool, like the idea of like thrones, you said plural,
Right.
meaning that each one, Jesus, Muhammad, they all have this throne next to God. God is like maybe this spiritual being, and then there are all these like placements, and it just like that's really cool to me.
We know Abdu'l-Baha, who wasn't even a manifestation, could be doing multiple things at the same time. And the fact he's talking to you doesn't keep him from dictating letters to 4 other secretaries sitting there at the same time. He'll say, okay, now he goes from one to the next and nothing. But these people, these messengers of God, you may see them in the physical sense here on this earth, but their soul is and spirit is in the next world and other worlds of the next world, multiple ones. At the same time, they're there in the room with you. We don't know how that works. There's a story that I reported in Lighting the Western Sky, where Helen Ellis Cole, who was a cousin of May Maxwell, which is how she heard about the faith, she was a widow. Her husband had been a prominent lawyer in New York. And when she went on pilgrimage, Abdu'l-Baha said to her that your husband asked me to bring you to me. Well, her husband's dead. And she looked very astonished. And he said, don't you know that Abdu'l-Baha is clear and visible in all the worlds of God? So he can converse with people who are in the next world at the same time he was here. And he wasn't even a messenger of God. So you can imagine what Baha'u'llah's and Jesus and Muhammad, what their true powers were. Nothing whatsoever keepeth him from being occupied with any other thing. And they were sent forth from the power of the Ancient of Days. That's God. This is pretty astounding. We don't get to see their spiritual reality. It's covered in clouds. Okay, who haven't I picked on for a while? Shaheen, are you actually, Sarus, are you actually with us or just able to listen?
I'm back.
Ah, good.
All right. In the utterances of the divine luminaries, the term heaven hath been applied to many and diverse things, such as the heaven of command, the heaven of will, the heaven of the divine purpose, the heaven of divine knowledge, the heaven of certitude, the heaven of utterance, the heaven of revelation, the heaven of concealment, and the like. In every instance, he hath given the term heaven a special meaning, the significance of which is revealed to none save those that have been initiated into the divine mysteries and have drunk from the chalice of immortal life. For example, he saith, the heaven hath sustenance for you, and it containeth that which you are promised, whereas it is the earth that yieldeth such sustenance. Likewise it hath been said, the names come down from heaven, whereas they proceed out of the mouth of men. Wert thou to cleanse the mirror of thy heart from the dust of malice, thou wouldst apprehend the meaning of the symbolic terms revealed by the all-embracing Word of God, made manifest in every dispensation, and wouldst discover the mysteries of divine knowledge. Not, however, until thou consumest with the flame of utter detachment those veils of idle learning that are current amongst men, canst thou behold the resplendent morn of true knowledge. Know verily that knowledge is of 2 kinds, divine and satanic. The one welleth out from the fountain of divine inspiration. The other is but a reflection of vain and obscure thoughts. The source of the former is God himself, the motive force of the latter, the whisperings of selfish desire. The one is guided by the principle, fear ye God, God will teach you. The other is but a confirmation of the truth, knowledge is the most grievous veil between man and his Creator. The former bringeth forth the fruit of patience, of longing desire, of true understanding, and love, whilst the latter can yield naught but arrogance, vainglory, and conceit. The heart must needs therefore be cleansed from the idle sayings of men, and sanctified from every earthly affliction, so that it may discover the hidden meaning of divine inspiration, and become the treasury of the mysteries of the divine knowledge.
Thank you. Any thoughts on those passages?
I mean, this is honestly, this is one of my favorite parts of the Iqan. You know, knowledge is of two kinds, divine and satanic. That's kind of what stuck with me maybe the most.
Yeah.
And I think about this a lot. You know, sometimes I try and wonder you know, what circumstances am I witnessing, you know, satanic knowledge, you know? I guess anytime that you're on the fence about something and you know, I guess it's really like the two, you know, in the cartoons there's like some angel on your right shoulder and like a Satan on your left shoulder.
Right.
It's like, you know, your knowledge might, you know, lead you to do one thing and then the Satan is like, you know, telling you, you know, go, you know, push him off the fence or I don't know. But you know, I guess a lot of the times the veil between, you know, for people, I guess that's what this whole book is about. For religious people, the veil is the satanic knowledge, the knowledge that is preventing you from learning, you know, religious truths or learning or growing spiritually. Whatever is preventing you from this growth can be considered satanic knowledge, I think. But really, I mean, satanic knowledge, it's really broad. Like I feel like anytime I, I guess I don't know, like anything that might lead you to deviating from, you know, following the writings could be considered satanic knowledge. Or maybe maybe in the case of the fast, you know, right now we're almost done with the fast, but I mean, um, like I, you know, went for a walk today, for example. It's just, and then maybe I'm like, you know, I went for a walk, so now I can drink water, right? Like it depends on like what is like hard, you know, physical exercise. But like, I don't know, that was a bad example. But, you know, anything that might, you know, if I don't otherwise really need to drink water and want to keep the fast, I guess the satanic knowledge might be that which is kind of impelling you to like maybe breaking the fast or um any anything really that might lead you to deviate from, you know, following the um I guess the writings.
Well, this quote here, which I think also comes from the Quran, knowledge is the most grievous veil between man and his creator. If you follow the careers of a lot of people in the sciences, you see that in the early years, because they're sort of focused on the physical world and they think everything can be determined through reason and scientific method, they go through many scientists, at least in my study of their lives over the years, start off with becoming skeptical about religion, skeptical about the spiritual. But the more that they see and know of science, of the way the universe works, they become awestruck by it and realize that there has to be something behind it, that there is you know, they become actually more spiritual the older they get and the more that they see the workings of God through science. But in the beginning, that knowledge becomes a veil. And I think that that's how many people go off to college and come out atheists or agnostics after starting off with faith. So it's hard to, we don't want to be people who don't pursue knowledge, but there's a spiritual aspect to all knowledge. And it's very difficult to know where the one is satanic and the other is divine, because much knowledge can be both.
Sometimes we talk about you know, Simon from the Bible. I think maybe with you we've discussed too. I mean, he was you know, we talk about how he was a very simple man, but
Right.
still, you know, I guess he lacked maybe some of the satanic knowledge, and that did not prevent him, you know, from recognizing, you know, becoming one of the what do we say? He was one of the 12
The disciples,
you
yeah.
know,
And he's,
disciples, right?
yeah, as has been pointed out, I've been addicted to the TV series The Chosen and some of the very good things that are coming out about what we know about the 12 disciples. that there were other members of the disciples who, from what we can glean from scripture, were probably better educated and even smarter than Simon Peter. Peter, we know from the Baha'i writings, was illiterate. And I'm suspecting that perhaps today we would diagnose him as ADD and having some learning difficulties. The Abdu'l-Baha says that he couldn't keep track of the days of the week, so when he was out fishing, he would wrap his food into 6 bundles so he would know which day was the Sabbath day when he ran out of food, because he wasn't supposed to fish on the Sabbath day. So he had to come up with a system because he couldn't keep things straight. So probably not a super organized person, but yet he was the one whose heart understood who Jesus was. And so Jesus made him his successor, rather than someone like Matthew, who would have, as a tax collector, had to have been educated. So I want to quickly talk about clouds here, and then that will probably be a good stopping point, if that's okay. Do we have time, Mateen? Are we okay for another few minutes? Okay. All right. So who haven't I picked on? Shaheen, welcome.
Thank you. And I can read, yes.
Yes, if you can read, please, for the next couple, that would be great.
Regarding his words, that the Son of Man shall come in the clouds of heaven. By the term clouds is meant those things that are contrary to the ways and desires of men, even as he hath revealed in the verse already quoted. As oft as an apostle cometh unto you with that which your souls desire not, ye swell with pride, accusing some of being impostors and slaying others. These clouds signify, in one sense, the annulment of laws, the abrogation of former dispensations, the repeal of rituals and customs current amongst men, the exalting of the illiterate faithful above the learned opposers of the faith. In another sense, they mean the appearance of that immortal beauty in the image of mortal man, with such human limitations as eating and drinking, poverty and riches, glory and abasement, sleeping and waking, and such other things as cast out in the minds of men and cause them to turn away. All such veils are symbolically referred to as clouds. These are the clouds that cause the heavens of the knowledge and understanding of all that dwell on earth to be cloven asunder, even as he hath revealed. On that day shall the heaven be cloven by the clouds, even as the clouds prevent the eyes of men from beholding the sun, so do these things hinder the souls of men from recognizing the light of the divine luminary. To this beareth witness that which hath proceeded out of the mouth of the unbelievers as revealed in the sacred book. And they have said, what manner of apostle is this? He eateth food and walketh the streets. Unless an angel be sent down and take part in his warnings, we will not believe.
Thank you. So clearly he's bringing up the fact that these are normal people. At least they look normal. They get tired, they get sick. We want an angel to tell us what to do. But I love this. As oft as an apostle cometh unto you with that which your souls desire not, ye swell with pride, accusing some of being impostors and slaying others. So they annul laws, abrogate former dispensations, repeal rituals and customs, exalt people who were not trained in religion and even illiterate above learned people. And then we have the mortal aspect of the messenger. So I was thinking as reading this to prepare for this, what are some of the clouds in this dispensation that are affecting people's ability to see Baha'u'llah? What are some of the things that souls don't desire that Baha'u'llah is telling them?
Well, just the, the elimination of a professional clergy
Right. Right. He got rid of a lot of rituals. We don't really even have rituals. We don't baptize. We don't say a blessing before dinner. We don't have a long marriage ritual or a long funeral service. We have very few rituals to speak of, not really any, except perhaps the prayer for the dead and the verse said at a wedding. So he got rid of all that. He got rid of clergy. What are the biggest clouds today when it comes to trying to teach the faith?
I think one is just like the origin of the faith. And since I wasn't born Baha'i, and I just, like my mom, it would just happen to go to the Lotus Temple when I was 12, and we were in India at the time. I remember, just reading a pamphlet. I took it and I started reading it, and it was like, Baha'is are like this group of people from Iran started by a guy named Baha'u'llah. And I thought, oh, they seem like a bunch of hippie Sufis that think like all the religions are one and that they all come from the same God. What a little baloney. And now I'm like, uh, and yeah, obviously I was 12, but well, now I see, was, yeah, a lot of trippiness is I mean, even now, like when I first encountered when I started my 5 years ago, and I started studying the faith and eventually became a Baha'i. I think that, yeah, it came off as like a very utopian, very idealistic version of Islam, like Islam light or Unitarian Universalism. And it's not either of those things.
So those are clouds that hit some people. What are some other clouds? What your soul's desire not? Because most of us at this point, Baha'u'llah, the man, the fact that his photograph is not too hard to come by on the internet, but that doesn't bother people as much because at least in the West we have these images of a prophet in long robes and a long beard and so forth. So we don't have the day-to-day that people who were with him would have had. But what are some other clouds for this generation? What about our teachings on homosexuality? What about no women on the House of Justice?
Yeah, I was going to say those two, and also the partisan politics, not being involved in partisan.
Right, not getting involved in. You can't go man the barricades when you want to, Materialism. Materialism.
I would even say progressive revelation.
That's interesting. Why do you say that?
Well, in the past, there was no mention of it per se. It was almost like this is the new belief. Follow this. Forget the old. And if you even try to convert, like even Muslims, if you try to convert, you're dead. We're gonna kill you. So in the Baha'i faith, at least it's like this understanding of, every religion is true to an extent, and that's not really heard of.
Right. Good point. And yes, and for many people, it's, oh my gosh, I want someone who is Jesus. I want Jesus to come back.
But being in love with the lamp and not the light.
And my husband said being in love with the lamp and not the light, that's a cloud. Any other clouds?
Maybe prayer.
Yeah, if you're not someone accustomed to having a religious life, that was hard.
Prayer in the sense of even like forgiveness, like forgive this communication with God, where in the past it's a communication to an individual who then prays for you.
Right. Well, for many people, if they don't come from a background where they're accustomed to praying, even if they go to church or a synagogue, they may not be accustomed to praying. To suddenly have a prayer book, being asked to pray several times a day, that's quite different. Well, dear friends, I think is it
Attachment to the Lakers.
yeah, attachment to the Lakers. Yeah, where are the sports in the Baha'i writings, right?
Well, they suck anyways, so it's all right.
I can't see a clock on this with the screen share. So is it getting let's see, 7 o'clock your time?
Already 7:02.
Okay, and what time is sundown?
In like 1 minute, I think.
Okay, so I better let you guys go. So I'll stop share for now, and we'll pick up a little bit more on clouds next week.